Welcome in, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. The landscape of the world is changing, and it's probably going to change quite a bit within the coming year and possibly even the coming months here. And I'm here to discuss that today, particularly from an economics point of view and a macroeconomics, or the way that nations relate to each other and the impact that that has on all the way down to your pocketbook. Now let's be awful clear. I'm not a professor of economics. I've always enjoyed studying macroeconomics, or how the world interrelates on a nation level, financial level. I find that stuff very fascinating. How your local neighborhood store runs, I don't find so interesting. It's not really my thing. But huge money flows, the way that nations conduct their business and run their alternative systems, from communism to socialism to capitalism, what few pure capitalist systems there are, is very fascinating to me. In post-World War II, post-Great Depression, we've had what I call an engineered world here, particularly in the West, where studying models of Keynesian economics, governments have been very apt to get involved to, I don't want to say cushion things, but to make sure that when the hammer falls, i.e. when things crack up like housing, like the telecommunications bust of the 1990s, and all these things go bad, the black swan of the pandemic that occurred in 2020, that there's some type of safety net or support underneath of it. But in the short run, that's a good thing. Puts food on the table, it keeps people in housing, it keeps things flowing along pretty good. But the problem is that the free hands of economics, Adam Smith's invisible hands of capitalism, will not be denied over the long run. And all of those government interventions, government supports, government intrusions, government help, goes a long way to contributing to long-term destabilization in world economies. And that's a fact of life. Because what fails to happen is, when the stuff hits the fan, instead of Darwin at play, and the cheaters and the idiots and the flim-flam artists and the people that didn't know what they were doing, instead of them being eliminated and taken out by market forces, they're kept alive through government support, and government putting that support underneath everybody, and the piper never has to be paid. Okay. So people over generations start to get this idea that we're in a foolproof system, right? No matter what happens, government can and will be there to be that safety net underneath of things that go wrong, particularly bad decisions that are made by people that are supposedly smart. And it never really gets a chance, because this government support underlies things. The dead wood in the system never gets cleaned out. And it just gets built upon floor by floor by floor. It never gets fixed. Okay, the rotten wood is never hauled away. A new foundation is never built. We just built on top of the same creaky structure and hope to keep it going. Well, some interesting things are happening in the world today as we float our way towards $28 trillion of accumulated debt in this nation. And we have countries like China, and China is going to figure real big in this story right now. They get involved, and for the first time, you have to remember, China was really hardcore communist when founded in 1949, the People's Republic of China. But all the way back to their founding in 1921 as a party within China. China has been very much a hands-on in the way that the resources of the nation should be distributed. Everybody should be equal. Men and women each hold up half the sky. All these values of communism, which I take to be equal misery for all, They tried to apply those principles and it turned into a miserable failure in China, as it did in the Soviet Union and other places, because governments cannot be smart enough to properly allocate resources where the market would allocate them. The free and invisible, the invisible hands of a free market don't care about anything except the highest price point of profitability to deliver some good or service, okay? That's all it cares about. It doesn't recognize tears, it doesn't recognize fears, it doesn't recognize economic horror and deprivation. It just distributes according to profitability and potential profitability. In other words, it's very cold-blooded in the way that it operates, but it's also extremely efficient too. And communist nations, and to a large extent, socialist nations, find out to their chagrin over time that they don't do a very good job of distributing goods and services and keeping an economy flowing good and satisfying the wants and desires of its citizenry. It has no mechanisms to do that. You know, people may want fancier TVs, and communist governments say, "Hey, it's a TV. Okay, we don't have to improve it. It does the job." There's the picture. You know what I'm saying? So there's no impulse for improvement. There's no impulse for creativity, for innovation. Because why should I innovate in developing a better product when I'm not going to eat any better than the guy that's using a trowel to dig a new canal across China, a new shipping canal by hand? We're going to be paid the same, right? What's the point? There's no payoff to me. So communism and socialism have always been great blunters of innovation and creativity, because by their very theory, by their very structures of theory, their reward systems are unequal by nature. They're designed to have equivalency of outcome. Okay, everybody can be equally miserable. Well, in the case of China, and this is all leading someplace, in the case of China, they've had very short experience. You know, I've lived 5 years in China. I know a little bit about the Chinese psyche. I speak Chinese. I know the way that Chinese people think, okay? And I can tell you one thing, being founded as the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949, and then about 1989, 1990, about the time that I was in China, places like that, Deng Xiaoping, leaders came in, and they recognized why the Soviet Union collapsed, and they didn't want the same thing to happen to China, okay, without having a mercantile base of advancement or technology or a way to better people in China in a big, grand way. They got scared. Okay, they got scared of things like Tiananmen Square and some of the things went on. So they loosened up and decided, hey, let's unleash the beast. Right, the Chinese merchants, the historical Silk Road traders and money makers. Let's unleash that spirit again. And think of the short time from about 1989 to 2021 now. What are we talking about? 31, 32 years. Look at what China's become today. It took the United States from about 1880 to about 1960 to have equivalent progress. It took about 80 years. China's pulled off in about 30, 35 years. Because why? Because technology, communications, right, price discovery through things like internet and computing has allowed nations to build wealth much faster today. But the problem is, in doing that, China has no generational experience. There is nobody within China today that had any experience in what it was to really run a capitalist economy. And I use run in quotation marks. Okay, because capitalism, pure capitalism, runs itself. Okay, doesn't need any hands on the controls, the invisible hands of Adam Smith. But today, we don't have that. China has no basis of that. They have no idea through history of what they should do, say, when things start to get out of control, or the train running down the track starts to run a little too fast and it overheats. And there's too much expansion going on at one time. There's too many buildings going up. There's too many developers pre-selling apartment units there. There's too many shipping ports being built. There's too many steel factories. There's too many boat building operations. You understand? It becomes what? A total free-for-all. And what's happening today, my friends, is the culmination of this free-for-all that's been occurring. To the point now that unrecognized in a lot of the West, and certainly unrecognized here, except by the very people that really study on a daily basis and really have a keen interest in things, they don't understand the edge that we're balanced on right here, right now. Because to tell you the truth, as China goes, so pitches the rest of the world right now. And we're not going to be able to escape the gravitational pull of a black swan or unpredicted economic event any more than the rest of the world was able to escape the gravity of the United States crash of 1929 and Great Depression. Okay, it's too large of a force in the world. So what am I building towards now? What I'm building towards now is that there's very strong, there's vibes coming out of China that are setting the stage for a full-on return to some type of communism. There's a fear factor growing in China that the stuff is so out of control right now. The loans are so out of control. The government lending, the government owned enterprises, the government joint venture enterprises. There's too much to keep track of. And the shit is literally imploding, if you pardon my expression over there. To the point, if you keep your ear to the ground and you get the small signals that come out from now and then, as you'll see in some of the clip headlines and things of newspapers and articles over the past few months, the signals are there. They're laying the groundwork when the stuff hits the fan in China, which it is. And we have Evergrande is a huge property development company in China. It's some $300 billion indebtedness, and people are lining up outside their headquarters because they put deposits down on apartments that ain't going to be built. Okay. Government seeing this stuff in Beijing and they're getting nervous, okay, because the grease is not on the wheels and the whole thing is kind of grinding to a halt here. They're doing things. They're pulling kids away from the internet. Now that may not be the worst thing, gaming and things. Get off of the computer. Limit your time to 3 hours a day. You're turning into a nation of potential idiots, okay? Gaming idiots. They're frightened what they're seeing out there. Okay, that's a huge one. Number two, they've had this big attack on technology. These companies like Alibaba and some of these other enormous Chinese technology companies have been under attack, okay? And they've been under attack because of the flamboyant lifestyles of the rich and famous of China, okay, engendering this envy among the average Chinese. And if we think of rich and poor as a long freight train with hundreds of cars, from the richest in the front to the poorest in the rear, there's a lot of poor people at the back of the train. And a lot of them have in their mind wondering, whatever happened to the good old theories of Mao and equivalency and Lenin Marxism, where we could all be equal. Look at these people living the lifestyle we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the vanguard of the capital of communism in the world. Look at what our nation's become. They're laying the groundwork. Another piece came out last week in discussions about wealth distribution in September in China. The concern about how people are being left behind. And it's becoming a nation of a thin crust of very wealthy people and a lot of poor people. And they're being forced to pay up big money for basic housing and things as these big builders and developers go hog wild in China. Raising prices, putting people into tremendous, bonding the nation into servitude. It's coming. It's coming. And the flashpoint might be Evergrande, the company that I told you about. It's about $300 billion in debt. And starting to default. Now the big thing is, China doesn't have the history that we have in this nation of bailing out bad stuff. Things that went wrong. China doesn't have that history. Why? Because they've only been at it for about 30 years. Right? And they're going to recoil in horror as the whole house of cards comes down. Big question is, will China go in there, swallow the pride, save face, start gutting the treasury of China to bail out people that run Evergrande, people that run some of these other developers, these land speculators, these businesses that overdeveloped? Are they going to come like the posse, like the United States Treasury and the United States Federal Reserve did here, and come over with the posse and the cavalry to rescue these people? Stay tuned. That's going to be another act of the. That'll be another act of the big show here. But I can tell you this. When, not if, things go bad, which they're already starting to, the seismic faults are being felt right now. Overexpansion, exactly like the 1920s in America. China's just coming up to the same thing we went through in 1929. They're laying that groundwork so that you can pull out the Mao suits, the green hats, with the red star on front, start marching down the streets with red banners, and baby, it's the return of communism. Now, what's bad for China theoretically would be good for the rest of the world, because if China returns to a command economy where Beijing's telling what you can do, what you can't do, how much you should charge for that housing unit, how much that person should be paid, digging the next Grand Canal with a trowel in their hand. You don't understand what I'm saying? You devolve backwards at the speed of light. But we're an interconnected world now. One of the charts that I want you to look at as the end of this, is I put some of the charts up. Look at the yield, or how much you're being paid to buy a junk bond right now. And junk bonds are generally lesser grade bonds. Government bonds are supposed to be the best, so they would pay the least because the risk is very low. And then you have the most speculative, which are junk bond rated. Well, look at the spread between government, what you get in lending your money to the government, 3-4%, and look at what junk bond people are now, look at what people that buying junk bonds are now requiring, 14%. You can't run a railroad on 14%. And worsening. The alarm bells are ringing because risk is growing in the system dramatically, and it's being reflected in the junk bond market, because that's the most sensitive part of any free market borrowing system. The junk bond, the least rated borrowers, what's happening to them? They're like the canaries in the coal mine that go bad. Okay. The problem with the interconnectedness now of our country is, and we are interconnected, is we all depend for trade, financing, stability, and things like that on each other. We're interconnected in shipping and supply problems that we're seeing now in getting shipping and getting product available. The demand is off the roof. Computer chips, things like that. The whole system is just grinding. It's like the liquidity, the lubrication is gone out of the system here. And the problem with our country is we sit here with our, like China, well, they were, but our equity markets, our stocks, our expectations are the highest they've ever been for, investing. And this in itself is a real danger sign because of the interconnectedness of the world. China starts to go in a big way. There's how many trillions of dollars of U.S. investments overseas? Just consider what happened in the last 2 weeks with the casino stocks. Sheldon Adelson, right? Las Vegas Sands sold, he's gone now, but Las Vegas Sands decided to sell out of their Las Vegas properties and focus their attention in Macau, what used to be the Portuguese colony across the Pearl River from Hong Kong. I used to go there on the jet boil and had a good time gambling in Stanley Ho's casino. Point I want to make is China setting the stage for the re-embracing of communism started rattling the cage about, you know what? We're going to start taking more control of the casino business. Will the first step be the last? You look at the stocks like Wynn, Las Vegas Sands, MGM, all of them, Caesars, all of them that have properties over in Macau, they dove off into the pool with no water in it. That, my friends, is a little bit of the foretaste of other businesses and enterprises that might be enmeshed. Technology, production, parts. I guess the bottom line of what I'm saying today is that the next black swan event here, unpredicted, unforeseen, happens at a time when virtually everybody's looking the other direction. Things are sky high, things are beautiful. Never in the history of the world have stock prices been as high, as expensive. Stocks have never been as expensive as they are right now. They literally are built upon a perfect future. Slightest little thing goes wrong with the equation. Maybe gambling in China is not going to be, you can see the board meetings occurring. Stuff's starting to happen, my friends out there. China's laying the way for failure by getting ready to grab the go-to of communism again. And they can stand up there and the leaders can default left, right, and center and say, you know what, because we have re-embraced Marxist, Chinese, communist ideals of how a nation should be run. We made a mistake. We'll take the hits. You guys are going to take the bigger hits out there. The other additional problem is we don't have the bench depth to deal with crisis anymore. We have so stripped out the borrowing capacity We're up against another debt ceiling here, negotiating another debt ceiling. We are so up against the capacity of borrowing. We're about to test the mathematical possibilities and horrors of exponential debt compounding upon debt, because interest rates, risk is rising in the system now. And when risk rises, so do interest rates. And we've been sliding down the interest rate slide since 1981 here. From about 18% to about less than 0.5%. Ain't gonna last forever. When the tide turns and debt starts compounding on debt, well, we don't have to finish this scenario, right? The capacity, the appetite, the willingness since the Great Depression in the Great Society to put that safety net under everything in every enterprise, every bank. All your savings are insured up to $200,000. Securities investors protection. All your money in stocks is secured against failure. Therefore, bankers can make crappy little decisions. Because at the end of the day, the depositors won't be coming at them with tar torches and pitchforks like back in the old days when the bank failed. It's all a real quiet, neat, no problem. But everything gets thrown on the debt pile. And I'm not so sure that a day doesn't come when, well, let's just say the day the old welfare checks start to bounce is a day that's going to be a real day of reckoning here, especially in this country. It's one reason that I think prepping has always made a lot of sense, to be able to have something as a backstop, because you don't know how interrelated things and how dependent we are on things like truckers who are being stressed beyond belief, but haven't quite hit the right way. You know, they used to be Teamsters, and then you had these, the breaking up of union. You know, you had the deregulation of trucking. Things. There's people working night and day to try to figure out how to become more organized. To demand a better life for truckers. Hopefully today you see what I'm talking about and things that are going on in the world. I will leave you with a few visuals as we go out to sort of set the scene. Other things of just subtle signs of the government in Beijing starting to rearrange the chairs a little bit. The musical chairs, and it's quite telling when Xi Jinping, the president of China, came out in his Mao suit. After years of being in a blue suit, red tie, and white shirt. I mean, get the signs, people. Get the signs. There are black clouds on the horizon, and they're coming our way. Thanks for watching, everybody. And your comments are welcome down below, and I would be interested in hearing what you think. And thumbs up are appreciated. Thanks, everybody.